But the maiden, unafraid, smites with a rock the right hand of the fiery fury, averting thereby from her modest face the blazing weapons and torches of the fierce she-wolf. With her sword, she pierces the throat of the disarmed harlot, who vomits forth hot vapors clotted with black blood, and as she expires, pollutes the surrounding atmosphere with her foul breaths. That is from the Psychomachia by Prudentius. I am Tim McIntosh, and you have joined Hot Takes on the Classics. I am joined, as always, by Emily Maeda. Emily, you're here to walk us through the Psychomachia. I'm so curious about this.
I'm so excited about this.
This is unlike anything that we've done, and probably unlike anything we will do on this show. Isn't that right?
It totally is. So before we talk about what this is, the Psychomachia, I have to ask you a question.
Okay, I'm ready.
Did you ever read This Present Darkness by Frank Peretti? Did you ever read that?
Oh, I read it a long, long time ago.
How old were you?
Oh gosh, I don't know. Teenager, maybe?
Okay, that's what I was thinking, because I'm a little bit younger than you. We will not say how much, but I read it probably in elementary school.
And it's a Christian fiction, and it's a kind of end times sort of page turner. Isn't that right?
No, it's spiritual warfare.
It's spiritual warfare, and isn't the spiritual warfare around the end of times, or does it not have anything to do with the apocalypse? Okay.
No, not necessarily. No. I mean, actually, it's a little bit hazy for me, but I bring this all up because it relates to the text that we're reading now.
The Psychomachia.
Do you remember what the angels were pictured like? Do you remember this?
Oh, gosh, no, I don't. Do you? I mean, clearly you do.
Okay, I thought this book was amazing when I was 10 years old. I really did. I thought it was incredible. But they're all goth, like CrossFit dudes.
Oh,
do you remember
really?
This? Yeah, they're all totally goth CrossFit dudes. Okay.
So is it sort of like good guy vampires? Like whenever there's a vampire series or a vampire trilogy, the vampires are always like super hot brooding guys, and these are like super hot angel guys.
Totally.
Okay.
So now here's the connection to the Psychomachia.
Yeah.
Psychomachia literally means warfare of the soul. And Frank Peretti was writing a book about what he imagined spiritual warfare to be like. So this is the original This Present Darkness, except way better. And here's the clincher. All the awesome protagonists are women.
Really?
They're all women. Isn't that great?
This is fascinating. This is so fascinating.
I know. So, let's just get into the background of what this work is. So,
Emily, can I ask you, do you remember, how did you first come in contact with this? Because this is not like this is not on a lot of classics must-read lists.
Totally isn't. But it has had a huge effect on so many stories and poets and writers in the Western tradition that I think it's really important. So I first came upon it reading Robert Wilkins' book, The Spirit of Early Christian Thought. And I didn't know anything about it. And he, in that book, says that Prudentius is the first Christian poet. So he's the first Christian poet. And I read it there. And then I also teach a class on the virtues and the vices. And in this book, The Virtues and Vices in the Arts by Sean Tucker, he also excerpts a part of the Psychomachia. So I was actually kind of reading it all at the same time in different places. And I was like, why have I never heard of him?
Why haven't I read this?
Why have I never heard of him? So that's where I came upon it. Do you want to know a little bit about Prudentius, who he was?
I definitely want to hear about him. Yeah, when does he live? Where does he live? I'm curious.
So he is in Hispania. So he's in Spain. at the end of the 4th century. So,
Okay.
He is near Augustine in time. He's as Rome is crumbling, all of those
Yep,
things. Like
yep.
he's in that same place. And he's kind of a minor Roman official. So it's after Constantine legalizes Christianity. So he is a Christian and he's in some provincial post. But that is not how. Go ahead.
Do we know, is he Roman or is he Spanish?
He's Spanish.
Okay.
But
okay.
considers himself a Roman.
Okay, great.
Yeah. So he does not consider himself a government official. He considers himself a poet. He is a poet.
I love it.
It's just reminding me of all of these different people. Do you know who Charles Ives is?
No.
This great American composer who was like an insurance salesman.
Really?
And like Marie Poncet, this great poet who had 7 children and then she dies and everybody's like, oh my gosh, she's an amazing poet. Anyway, Prudentius follows in, or maybe he's the starter of that tradition.
Yeah.
He's like he's a great writer, but that's not his main job.
Bureaucrat by day,
Totally.
superhero poet cape at night.
That's exactly it. That's him. Okay. The other thing is he has written things that we still know. So do you know the hymn of the Father's Love Begotten? It's a Christmas carol. Yeah, he wrote it.
No way.
Yeah, he wrote it. Isn't that great?
Who is this guy? This is
I know.
incredible. I feel like I'm
know.
meeting a friend that I've known for a long time but have never actually spoken to.
Exactly. So it's so fascinating because he is a little bit after Ambrose, the Bishop of Milan, who's kind of like the first Christian hymn writer, right? Augustine, the story of Augustine, like going to Ambrose's church and being so moved by the music because they were singing these hymns. So Prudentius sort of follows in that line. But he really, really loves the epic poetry. He loves the Aeneid, and we just did a recording on the Aeneid. So he loves Virgil. He loves these poets, and there really isn't anything in Christian writing that has this.
And so he sets about to write this.
He certainly does.
This is so great. Emily, this is so great. I love it.
He certainly does. So he sets about, so he writes actually a bunch of different things. He writes like poems for the entire day, which are basically hymns of praise centered around different things throughout the day. So he, for a long time, was considered like the Christian Horace.
Wow, high praise.
Yeah.
Really high praise.
But he sets about writing the Psychomachia, and guess what? He sets it up like the epics. So it's written in dactylic hexameter, like the epic, poetic meter. And when the Psychomachia starts, it actually starts referencing Abraham. And so we get sort of that epic sense of like spanning a large tract of time, right? Like Abraham, when he was called upon to fight the people who had taken Lot captive, he fought them bravely. And now, Christ, we determine to fight the sin that encumbers us in our own souls. So,
this is, I'm sorry, this is just, I kind of can't believe what I'm hearing. This is what I wanted to be reading when I was a young Christian growing up. I wanted sort of like, I wasn't into the Beatitudes.
Totally.
Like I know, like what Jesus taught is good and right and true, but like I wanted like conflict and shields sparking against swords. And that's what it sounds like he's doing here in kind of an epic form. I'm even looking at the opening text that I read, who vomits forth hot vapors clotted with black blood. That was, oh my goodness, when I was 12, I would have been all over that.
And you are so right. You are so right. So he is taking, it's really a fascinating Christian move on the vir, the man, the hero of Rome, right? Who proves his heroic qualities by killing people, right? Like by vanquishing the enemy. this hero, these new heroes within the Christian faith, they're not doing that, but they are battling something more insidious than your mortal enemy. It's the sin that resides in your own soul, right?
So the terrain of warfare is inside of us.
Eternal. Mm-hmm. So isn't this incredible?
Because, it really is.
I mean, Charles Taylor, somebody kind of like a lot.
Yeah. Wait, tell me what Charles Taylor wrote, A Secular Age. He's probably like the living religious philosopher in the West. What is he? He's probably close to 90 now.
I think
he's Canadian.
90,
yeah. A huge, huge name. And Emily we both love Charles Taylor. You've done deeper reading than I have.
I love him so much. Charles Taylor, I love you. Anyway.
We're going to, friend of the podcast.
Yes,
friend of the podcast.
Friend of the show. Oh, if only he were. Wouldn't that make my world?
It really would. We'll send him a copy of this and he'll be like, who are you?
Yeah.
We're waiting to get to know you, Charles. Yeah.
Weirdos. Anyway, Charles Taylor says that violence and sex are the two driving urges within humanity that all religions seek to deal with. And he says Christianity amazingly transforms both into a way that negates the negativity associated with them. And
wow.
But isn't that the truth here? Like Prudentius is telling his readers, look, we've always thought about the vir, the man, as the heroic man, as one who goes out and slays opponents. I mean, Julius Caesar, right? We just did Caesar's Gallic Wars. He kills millions of Gauls, or 1 million Gauls, maybe not millions, 1 million Gauls, and he's considered a great man.
Yeah.
But that is not what makes you a great man in God's world. It is putting to death the works of the flesh.
I just want to say, this is really potent material because around this time, the Roman Empire, like you said, is being Christianized, not just because of the Edict of Constantine, but you can see conversion rates. Rodney Stark has tried to calculate the conversion rates, and the Roman Empire goes from around, 100 Christian believers in 30 AD. These are all very approximates. And by 350, they estimate that the number is around 32 million. So from 100 to 32 million, 52% of the empire in what is historically the blink of an eye, 300 years.
Exactly.
And so all of that is happening. And at the same time, as Christianity is becoming more predominant, they're looking with suspicion at things like the gladiatorial games. Like, this is just bloodlust. It's just awful bloodlust. And as Christians gain influence, they begin to close the doors on this barbaric practice. But it's interesting that Prudentius, wait, did I say his name right?
Oh, sure. I mean,
he is kind of, how would you say it? Circumscribing violence and relocating it.
Exactly. Well, and he's doing sort of what Augustine talks about when Augustine uses this analogy. We're plundering the Egyptians, which is, right? You know this analogy, that we're going to go and we're going to take what the ancients have given us, or, the Greek and Roman tradition has given us, but we're now going to use it in a different way. So Prudentius is writing in a vernacular that people get and people are moved by, right? They're moved by it.
Yeah.
And up until this point, Christian writing has been basically epistles, letters, theological tracts, apologies, right? But it's all been very heavy prose. And we know that this is a poetic time, right? That poetry still moves people.
Right.
And so Prudentius is going to do that. He is going to fashion his poetic epic using allegory. How do you feel about allegory?
I want to like it more than I do like it. Like Pilgrim's Progress. It's like, it's a triumph, right? It's a triumph.
Yeah.
But it's it's kind of like, oh, but it's not real. It's kind of an overlay, or it's like the shadow of reality that we're dealing with.
Yeah.
The reality is more exciting.
Right. Well, and also, I mean, I just going to confess, I do not love Pilgrim's Progress.
Okay.
I do not love it.
Safe space. Yep.
Because it's so on the nose. It's so on the nose.
Right.
And I think that like for us as modern people, that's kind of what bothers us. Like it's so on the nose, right?
Absolutely. I think part of the thing that like we probably both respect about Pilgrim's Progress is that it's a huge stepping stone. Like we both love fiction novels. It's a wonderful form that's kind of recent. And I think Pilgrim's Progress is one of the big stepping stones that got us to the modern novel as a genre.
Totally. Well, and that's that's part of how we think about Prudentius, because he's the OG stepping stone, right? Like,
oh yeah,
definitely Pilgrim's Progress is taking a page right out of this book, as was Edmund Spencer, as was the Piers Plowman who writes that. I'm forgetting in the moment, but all of those allegories from the Middle Ages are like a direct link to this. This is the original. Incredible. So, an allegory it carries a hidden meaning. Character traits are often personified, right, in the people. And that's exactly what happens here. So I told you there's an epic beginning. The true fight occurs within the human soul. And this is visualized by Prudentius with awesome virtues, who are these intensely strong women who are going to take on the vices and nasty vices, and they're all women.
I love it. Okay, do you read this with your classes, with like
we do
young women in your classes?
Yeah.
I'm dying to know, how do they respond to this?
Well, it really rocks everybody's world, because you just read that part about the blood, flowing out. I'm going to read you another part.
Is it equally as gory?
Yeah. This is soberness killing luxury.
Okay.
Drink up now thine own blood after thy many cups, says the maiden, upbraiding her. Be these thy grim dainties in place of too much sweetness that thou hast enjoyed in time past, the taste of bitter death in thy mouth, the savoring of this final ghastly draught, turns to gall the wanton delights that allured thee in thy life. Oh yeah.
This is so great. This is so great.
As she's rolling a huge boulder onto luxuriousness. Yes.
So it's kind of like, Emily, it's sort of like none of the calories, but that same great taste as some like violent carnage piece of like Greek poetry from Homer.
Totally.
I love it.
Yes, it is. And so I think, so here's another thing. C.S. Lewis did not like this poem. He did not like Prudentius. He thought Prudentius was too on the nose. But I think you only think that because we've accepted his character, his characterizations have become so ingrained in us, you know what I mean? That we've lost the amazingness of the originality. Because he's the first one to think about it this way.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Oh, right.
He's the first one to characterize these vices and virtues in this way. And a lot of the imagery that he uses continues to show up all the way to the present time. It's him. He did it.
If you watch one of the original release Star Wars now with somebody younger, they see all the imperfection in the technology. And these were made beginning in the late 70s. And so I have sat with students and they've watched A New Hope and they've been like, oh my gosh, it's so corny. And I want to just be like, nothing that you like today was possible without that movie. Give it show some grace. So it sounds like this is maybe this poem in the same way, like C.S. Lewis, hey, you're standing on the shoulders of giants here, man. Give the guy a break. Is that how you feel a little bit?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's kind of funny because Lewis is so good about, like, he rescues Paradise Lost from the trash bin, you know? J.R.R. Tolkien rescues Beowulf, like they'd all been discounted. So it's funny that he discounts this, but I mean, but it's not just him. I mean, a lot of people think, oh, Prudentius, like you're a little bit cloying, you know?
Yeah.
This is a little bit cloying.
Okay.
Also, Lewis was, he thought it was improper to show the virtues this sort of
graphically or
bloodlusting, right?
Yeah.
That like the virtues wouldn't be that. But I mean, I think when I read it, so I'm going to tell you who fights whom, and then I'll give you a little bit more of my thought on that. So faith fights paganism, or literally the worship of the old gods, and slices off her head.
Oh my goodness.
Chastity fights lust. And there's a really interesting quote in the middle of this where Chastity compares her actions to Judith chopping off the head of Holofernes. You know that story from the Apocrypha, right? And that story, the story of Judith chopping off the head of Holofernes, is a favorite of the medieval and Renaissance painters, right? So Prudentius makes that connection, right? He says, just like Judith did this is how chastity will come against lust, because Holofernes was lustful for Judith. Okay. Patience fights wrath. This is the best one.
Great. So it's like the Christian virtue in contrast with the kind of what I don't know what we're going to call it, the sinful impulse or something like that. And they're like, sit on the battlefield.
Totally. But this is great. So patience fights wrath. Patience just stands there, and wrath gets so angry and comes against Patience with her sword and breaks it on Patience's head, and then is so angry that like she consumes herself. So Patience doesn't even have to kill her. She like burns from the inside with her boundless anger. And then guess who walks on the battlefield with Patience?
Who?
Job.
Oh, really?
Isn't that great?
Long-suffering Job.
Long-suffering Job. And so this is what Job learned through all of his trials. So that's a great one. That's a great one because like this is a Spanish proverb. The punishment is in the sin. And that's kind of like with wrath, right?
Yeah.
You're so angry that you burn yourself up. Humility and hope take on pride. This is another one where pride, she is in this, she's magnificent and clothed, and she's got these great horses, and she's mad that these two meek little creatures, humility and hope, come against her. Like, it's kind of David and Goliath. How dare you come against me? How dare you, like, affront me with your lack of status? So she rides across the battlefield, and guess how she dies?
Oh, how?
Well, think about
Gorally. I know that. Gorally.
Gorally, is that a word?
I don't know. I made it up. Everyone knows what it means. So I think I'm going to call it a word.
She falls into a ditch dug by deceit.
Oh.
So think of a famous saying that I'm sure was not a famous saying for Prudentius. Pride goeth before the fall.
Emily, this is, now I'm leaping 1,000 years into the future, and I'm thinking about Dante's Divine Comedy.
Totally, yes.
In the Inferno, the first third of that big trilogy, those who are in hell are punished according to the nature of their kind of chief sin. So I'm trying to think of examples. Those we were talking about, like lust, those who were captive to lust are swept into a whirlwind of bodies, and they're just spun around because they're kind of made mad by their lust. And all of the characters in hell are kind of published in or punished in a similar way. It's called, I think in the Italian, contrapasso.
Yeah.
And so there's a little bit of that going on here.
Completely. Yep, completely. So eventually, humility chops off pride's head. So she's in the ditch, but then humility chops off her head and holds it up. So, humility
Wow.
and then sobriety triumphs over luxury. Luxury is so great because she comes onto the battlefield like redolent with perfume,
Of
beautiful,
course.
streaming.
Eating bonbons.
Yes. And guess what she's casting? She's
Wait,
casting
what?
flowers, casting flowers. She
Oh.
has no swords. And all of the virtues are hypnotized. And then on comes sobriety, and she says, what strange sort of warfare is here? And she takes her on, and she scares Luxury's horses, and Luxury goes over a cliff. And then this is actually, we started with chastity and lust, but she rolls a stone on top of Luxury and kills her.
Do you remember what sobriety is wearing? I'm imagining like Carhartts and kind of a beat up T-shirt.
Yeah. Well, I think that is the brilliance of the Psychomachia. So I sent you a PowerPoint with images, which I think you saw.
I did.
And, these are great because do you know when these were made?
No.
They were made in like the 10th and 11th century by Anglo-Saxon monks.
Whoa.
As like part of, because in medieval Europe, Latin students got two texts. They got Virgil and they got Prudentius.
Well, no way.
They got the Aeneid and they got the Psychomachia. And so the images I'm showing you, like they're clearly in Anglo-Saxon dress, right?
Yes, right.
Do you know what I mean? Which is like amazing, what you just said. Yeah, somebody needs to illustrate a modern day Psychomachia because that's exactly what sobriety would be wearing.
So I'm looking at this. These look like really expensive tapestries. There's in one of the images a kind of golden dial with 8 characters around 3 central figures. Maybe this is the Trinity, perhaps, or 3 angels. I don't know.
Yeah, no.
And it's
click down through because that's just like the cover. So that was the illumination.
I see. Okay,
so that isn't. These are like comic books because they're like comic book figures. Do you see them? Yeah,
there's flying horses and harpists, and here's some murders, a chariot murder. And somebody slaying somebody with a broken sword. This is intense. I love it.
But we'll make sure that there's links to these images so that people can see them. But it was like, this is a comic book, right?
Is this your hot take, Emily?
No, it's not my hot take.
Oh, okay.
No, it's not my hot take.
It is like a comic book.
Yeah. So isn't it amazing?
It really is.
So then avarice good works takes on avarice, and that's one of the last ones. And then right at the end, they've vanquished all the virtues have won out. The virtues have won out. They've vanquished everyone. They go and they're going to erect a beautiful temple of praise to God, and into the camp, who should steal but heresy. Heresy comes into the camp, and she's found out. And guess who Prudentius mentions? This is totally an aside.
As a companion to heresy or an opponent to heresy?
No, what are the heresies that he references?
Oh gosh, in 300, I've got to think.
Come on, you got this.
The Nicene Creed was written to address this. Is it
Totally.
Is the Docetus? Am I saying it right?
Yeah, but well, no, it's not that one.
Okay. Help me.
It's Arianism.
Arianism, of course. I should have known that. Arianism. Tell us what Arianism is.
It's a potent Christian heresy of Christ was not fully God. He was fully man, but he was not fully God. He was only God and sort of.
And he appeared in a certain way, but the divine nature and human nature were not like co-equal in him. We're getting into
anyway,
like the most mysterious. Yeah, this is like dangerous territory even for a professional theologian.
That's an aside. I just think it's kind of great. Like it's evidence of him speaking within his time and place, right?
Yeah, that's right.
So he gives Christians more than what they had previously. Okay, so here's my hot take.
I love it. Here we go.
C.S. Lewis was wrong. That's my hot take.
Oh, I love it. I love it.
How many times do we say that about C.S. Lewis? Never. Like,
Not
nobody
often.
ever says C.S. Lewis was wrong. He was wrong. He was really wrong about Prudentius. I think he was wrong. I think he was wrong in the sense that he thought, because he thought that the virtues were misplayed to show them so blood hungry. But just like what you said about being a young person in, if you had the Psychomachia to read with current illustrations,
Yeah.
like, it fires your imagination because you
Right.
want to be noble in the right way. And I mean, this is taken from scripture, like Ephesians, the armor of God, right? But Prudentius is so brilliant to show that warfare does not occur outside of ourselves. The greatest war occurs within the human soul, right? So, I mean, this is a problem, and it will remain a problem for Christianity. We're going to get the Crusades not too long from here, right?
Yeah.
And this lesson of harness your energies to fight in this manner, not with swords that kill people, but with the swords of the Spirit.
Right. Spiritual armor.
Yes, spiritual
like Paul
armor.
in his epistles. Put on the breastplate of righteousness, the sword of truth.
Yeah. And I think that Prudentius rightly takes his place in the list of epics, just like Milton is going to try and write Paradise Lost, which he also is trying to write an epic. Prudentius should be in this because he was dealing with themes that had already been given to him from the Iliad, the Odyssey, and the Aeneid, and he interprets them in his time and place, and then that interpretation is then the food for so many later thinkers. So I have can I read you a quote?
Please.
This is from Louis Snyder, who wrote, I think, a dissertation on this in like the 50s. I just found this online. So this is what he says. Grant that Prudentius is artificial in the handling of his theme. Grant that false ornament is not foreign to his descriptions, and that one grows weary over his prolix speeches and winces perhaps at his occasional play on words, or likes not his alliteration, assonance, or patent imitation of Virgil. Still, one must admit that all these means of presenting a subject were familiar to, even expected by the educated Christian reader of the 4th century. These Christians were interested to hear Prudentius sing their doctrine in a cultivated strain, using all the artifices of the schools. We who have Dante, Milton, Spencer, and a host of lyricists, who long since have wedded literary forms to the thought of Christianity, sometimes fail to see and grasp the situation of an age when imaginative Christian letters were unknown. We failed to recognize what it meant to those cultured Catholics to have one of their own, one with all the zeal and fervor of an apostle, imparting to the classical molds of literature the fresh outlook of Christianity.
What a great endorsement. Like he's reading him according to his time. And in his time, Prudentius is a revolutionary. And
he
like
really is.
Comes up with a new form. It's funny. I just want to say, when a new form comes forward, it's oftentimes it can be a little clunky.
Yeah, I was going to say, right, exactly.
Because it's
clunky.
a new form. We're trying something completely different. And so it's easy to kind of look back on the early first clunky prototype and be like, oh my gosh, the assonance is just so brutal, but it's an unfair reading because this person, like a la A New Hope, Star Wars, just really did something transformative. And after that, movies are different. And it sounds like what you're saying is, after this, Christian poetry becomes a thing.
Yeah, it finally becomes a thing. Yeah, and also just that sense of the Christian is not defined by war in the way the ancients defined war, right? I mean, that's a huge deal. Huge deal that we're now interpreting what it means to be heroic and virtuous, because virtus in Rome is manly strength. It's battle strength, right? That is what the word virtue comes from. Right. And here he is saying, no, virtue is very different. And not only that, I just love, it's my inner feminist, I guess. I just love the fact that it's women doing this also, which I was thinking about it. Somebody has had to have written a PhD on this, but why is it women? I'm assuming from the muses, don't you think?
No, I don't. I just don't know, because I've had so little contact with this, almost nothing before this podcast. So I was actually going to ask you the same question. It sounds like your answer is the muses.
The muses. That's what I'm thinking, because then from ever after, like, all the virtues are always portrayed as women through Western art history. They're always women.
You don't think that it is a deliberate kind of counter-distinction to that sort of like brute, masculine, violent energy that has been the hallmark of so much of like Western poetry
Vice.
Previous to this point?
Possibly. I mean, yeah, I think I was researching it and I didn't come up with a great answer as to why that's the case. But I guess also in Jewish literature, like in Proverbs, wisdom is a woman, right? So
right,
often,
yeah.
And in Latin, these abstract nouns are always feminine. So it has something to do with that as well.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
I would guess that the muses also inspire that, you know?
That makes a lot of sense. I think that's a great speculation. That's
So
a very potent speculation. Emily, great. That was really great.
Well, thanks, Tim. I'm glad you liked it. Let's go,
I really
women.
did.
It's our first appearance of women in this series on war. I mean,
Right on.
that are soldiers, right?
We'll see more. We'll see more in the future on this season on war. Hey, we want to thank everyone for joining us for Hot Takes on the Classics. I want to thank our producer, Clark Stefanik. Thanks to True North, our platform. There are other shows on this platform that we encourage you to check out, like Classical U podcast. Our music was written and performed by Tom Hagerman. Join us for our next episode on this season of warfare.